Hey guys, I'm trying to get ahead on some recordings, and we are now going to have a grow group help for Daniel chapter 6. And this is like the, the best one of the Bible stories that you can think of. If you're looking on your Mount Rushmore of like Old Testament Bible studies, Daniel and the Lion's Den's got to be up there. At least a top 10. It's probably one of the most vivid ones that a lot of people will remember from their childhood. Uh, Number one, because you have this figure like Daniel who does not adhere to the law, the human law, when it contradicts God's law. And, a couple things I want to emphasize with Daniel's just perseverance and his unapologetic faith. It says, when Daniel learned that the document had been signed, he went into his house. The windows in his upstairs room opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees, prayed, and gave thanks to his God, just as he had done before. I like the phrase, just as he has done before. And it's a big question for all the students and for us is, are we going to continue being faithful to the Lord from past until present and for the future? And so that's a very, very good question to ask students going into this week is thinking through that when we do get to the point where we get done, because I'll preach this certain text on September 28th. And so, to me, that's where it gets really, really good. Daniel, time and time again, is being challenged by culture, and he continues to be faithful to God despite what culture says. The other thing that I find really interesting, this will be a much shorter one today, but there's a couple of times that it really makes very clear. The second point I'll make before I get to that one is the fact that they couldn't find anything to nail down Daniel. Like, Daniel was such a righteous man. Now, that does not mean that Daniel was sinless. But man, Daniel was so uncorrupt, so morally absolute in so many different ways. It says they could not find a charge of corruption, for he was trustworthy. No negligence or corruption was found in him. Now we know, and you're going to see this in the Christ-centered exposition book, is Jesus truly is the one that is the better Daniel, who had no sin in him. He was tempted just as we were, but yet without sin. We see that in the book of Hebrews. He is the sheep that went to the slaughter. No, there was no deceit found in his mouth. That's a paraphrase from, I think, Isaiah 52 or Isaiah 53. So again, it gives us this visual Christ-like picture that Daniel's giving to us from his testimony that's pointing to Christ, Christ being the ultimate perfect man, perfectly God. But then the thing that you see the sovereignty of God at play that it kind of gets forgotten in the story. Here's where I'm going to really probably press in a lot with students. Unless we find something against him concerning the law of his God. So they had to figure out some way to manipulate the system to where basically we got to make a law or something to where it's going to contradict what he believes in so that it puts him in trouble with the world and not in trouble with God. But if he's in trouble with the world, then we can eliminate him. So they do that, and it says this law they did through the Medes and the Persians is irrevocable, cannot be changed. That comes in verse 8. That's the edict that was signed by the document by King Darius. Now, what's really intriguing, it says this again in verse 12. The king answered, as the law of the Medes and the Persians, the order stands as irrevocable. It's certain. It cannot be changed. The other part, verse 15, is when even the king was trying to figure out a way, okay, how can I save Daniel? How can I make it possible where he doesn't get hurt? These men come together and say, your majesty, that it is a law of the Medes and the Persians that no edict or ordinance the king establishes can be changed. I think it's important in a weird way that through a faulty, manipulative, corrupt political system that is put in place, a political law that is to the detriment of Daniel's faith, Daniel still is faithful, and it had to happen. It had to happen that he was going to go to his supposed grave to be with the lions, but he was delivered. And I think that's important that we see that picture of Christ in that picture, that Christ ultimately had to go to the cross. You see in the Garden of Gethsemane, he asked the Father, if there's any other way, if there's any other way that's possible, please, would you please, can there be some other way in your will, essentially? And obviously there was no answer, because Jesus had to pay the price. He had to absorb the wrath of death, sin and death, the full brunt of that, way worse than any lion, any animal lion. But he had taken on the wrath of God, the roaring lion, God himself, not the faulty roaring lion, the Satan himself, who tries to roar, but his sounds more like the purr of a kitten. And God makes it clear. And it's like, no, this is going to happen. Jesus has to go to the cross. Even though he goes to the cross, he does die, unlike Daniel, but in his death, he rises 3 days later. He comes out of the tomb, just as Daniel came out of his tomb, came out of the lion's den unscathed. Jesus comes out unscathed by sin, death, and the evil one. And so I hope that encourages you today. It encourages you to stay faithful. And I pray that would encourage our students this week to stay faithful in their walk with Christ. That's Daniel chapter 6.